cut one strip that's quite long enough, then yes, they go together perpendicular to each other. And I usually just do a 1/4 inch for this. So we'll do right sides together, around and around, and then we can let that raw edge just sit up there and put a stitch in place. So it's 2 stitches. Right sides together first. I'll just do a little quickie sample right here. And then over. Press, and we're wrapping it, snugly. We're not folding anything under here, just keeping it wrapped right against. So you're only seeing like that 1/4 inch of the binding, the bias part. Do cut it on the bias because it won't go around the curved edge well otherwise. And then your Hong Kong, you would just be edge stitching and letting it be up there. You'd be fine to just let that raw edge be. If you want to bind it, then you would be turning that under and just having it all be clean. Either way. Once your waistbands are put together on the side seams. But let's talk about making my string here. Okay, so I have a drawstring and it's just going to match my fabric. And it's also bias. And once I think about what size I want my drawstring to be, probably just a 1/4 inch, nothing major. Then I can figure out how wide I need to cut my bias strips. So if I want it to finish a 1/4 inch, and when they're folded right sides together, I will stitch at a 1/4 inch from the fold. And I would like a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So if I have extra, I can trim it down. And sometimes it's easier to have extra and trim it down because you get pretty narrow holding this stuff. But I don't want less because I want the seam allowance to fill my string and be like the fluff. So if I was doing a 1/2 inch string or something, then I'd want 1/2 inch seam allowance to fill. Now these guys, we have to make sure we're folding and staying perpendicular to the cut edges. Like, we don't want to get that whole roping business happening where they can start to torque, because that's real easy to do. Flowers, we don't want to torque. So I know, like in couture, when they're making special little spaghetti straps and so on, they'll hand-based in sections before we stitch, so that it all falls very nicely. But here with my twill today, I will just machine stitch. So I'm doing regular stitch length So the bias, you know, you have the ability to like, narrow it down if you stretch it. We don't need to be stretching it for this. And we just keep on going. I need a good bit of string to go all the way around my waist, and then have some tying left over. You guys, some stranger commented on one of my YouTube videos. It was the fisheye dartling, that she liked mine better than anybody else's she watched. I think it was a she. I think it was a stranger, so I don't quite know. Alright, so we are almost there. Okay, so now I want to go through and trim it down so that essentially the stitch is right in the middle of the width of my fabric. So I don't want more seam allowance than a 1/4 inch, you know, just right in the middle. And we'll do that all the way down the length.